Welcome everybody to today's Midnight 6.6 training session. In today's training session, we'll be looking at our print estimating system on a more advanced level. We'll be looking at print estimating from a different angle, not going over the basics as we had in our prior print estimating training, but going over some more advanced features such as including and setting up multi-part jobs, wide format jobs, building templates to quickly get our data entered in, getting a better understanding of where numbers are coming from for costing and sale price information, and then looking at how this translates to either production or the scheduling board for reporting. To start things off, we'll jump into and create a new order. This will bring us straight into a screen in which we can begin filling out our information for a job, such as our customer, quantity needed, project name, and for today's example, the due date. For today's situation, we'll be starting off with this information here at the top, adding in some general values here, and then we'll be looking at our print tab to bring up our print calculator. The first thing we'll look at today is printing for books. In this case, it would represent the requirement of printing two different components, a single part being a text stock that would typically be the guts or the interior of your book, and then a second part being the cover stock. You could opt to create one print item per component, but that requires having two separate print calculators, and that may not be necessarily what you're trying to do as far as setting up your template information and filling out a job. Instead, within the print calculator, you can click this green Make Multi-Part Job button. When you do this, you'll be brought to a main tab, which acts as a hub. In this main tab, you can see that there's one tab up here next to it for the print product. And this is effectively what we'd consider to be our single part that we were just in. For this example, we'll work on a two-part book. We'll do the cover, we'll do the gut. In this case, after we add our component name, we'll also update our multi-part name to indicate that what we're doing here is a book project. We'll click Update tab, and we'll see that we have two new tabs here at the top, cover and gut, representing the part names that we have over here. You can have up to 7 parts. We find that you typically don't need more than 3 or 4 on a job, but you can have up to 7, which would work for something as, say, a kit in which you're printing off several different components that would be inserted into a small package, or a book that uses just a big variety of stock in terms of handling how it's printed, such as a cover stock, a gloss wraparound, and 2 or 3 different forms of guts or interior stock. After you've created your tabs, you can then enter each one. You can fill out your information, that being the press, the color, the stock, and anything else that's required to complete your job. Or we can start by filling out our info by selecting our press and then working our way downward. We don't necessarily have to do it this way, although we will for the sake of this example. In this case, I'll make an 8 by 10 book, and we'll set the cover to be a 2-sided cover printed sheet-wise. Other information from our press carried in, such as our default bleed, our impressions per hour and our hourly rate, as well as our make-ready information. We'll also enter the color details, and we'll select a couple of 4 color group options. By picking our colors, you'll see our size count of colors, and our coverage percentages have updated themselves accordingly. I'm changing these up a little bit so that way we have a 100% cover stock. 100% coverage on a cover stock for the top space and just a small coverage on the interior. Also pick a quality stock that has gloss in its name, which we can see by typing in gloss here and then selecting from our option, one that applies to what we're working on. In this case, we'll see our information like our weight, our price, everything carries through. And at this point, we've done pretty much everything required for our job. So this for the cover stage means that we can click calculate. We'll get our pricing information all set up, as well as our production info, such as how many sheets are required to complete our job. In this case, even though we're printing 50 pieces, we only need 23 to complete the job. We can see a breakdown of the press time, the ink required in pounds, the sheet information, and all of our cost information, which has each component summed to give you a total cost before markup. And then after markup is applied, you'll be given your print total, which can then have additional services from this additional services tab added to it if there's no markup on them to give you your grand total with all services. Some services that we may need to add in this case could include folding. You can also just select a setup service. Price. In this case, we'll see that we have a $15.50 fold charge, but a $15 setup fee, each with different markup commands. We hit calculate once more. We'll see that our total cost will jump up by $15.50, accounting for the fold here. This will cause our print total to shoot up just a little bit more. And then we have the $15 from our setup fee, which does not have markup, tacked on at the end to give us our grand total with all services. And do bear in mind that this is for just the cover component that we're working on. After we finish this component up, we can go into our guts portion. Within this tab, we're brought to a familiar screen. This is just representing the second part. In this case, if we need to fill out our information more quickly, we can do so by, instead of filling out each component individually, selecting from our template names dropdown, a template that represents the kind of work that we're doing. In this case, I have a booklet interior for a body set for 8.5 by 11. In this example, I'm working on 8 by 10 book instead, so I can just make a slight change. Also here at the top, we'll see that we have a number of pages. In this case, we have an 8-page booklet that we're making. We have 4 pages appearing per signature. And we also see that we have a signature size and a finished size present. If the number of pages here exceeds 1, then you'll have a different size and page distribution, because each signature may not necessarily be the actual finished piece of what's being printed. And if you have more than 2 pages, then you can determine how many pages you're actually printing per signature. What this signature size will mean is that the impression or the image that's being printed will be of a larger size, and then it will be trimmed down to the actual size. The other information for our template choice is carried through. We have our different color options. We have our paper already selected. If there were additional services, they would be listed in as well. And upon completion of this, we can hit calculate. And just like we saw in the cover portion, our guts will give us a required amount of material that's required to complete what it is that we're doing. In this case, because we're getting 4 page per signature count our 50 required pages. There are a total of 50 parent sheets that are necessary. And we're running 55 sheets through. This includes our overage amount. And once we click submit, we've effectively completed what we need to do for our cover and our guts portions. And we'll now have a handful of different line items set up within our system here. So that way we can see components. What we see in here for now is the cover portion. We also see the setup cost for our cover portion, which is that additional service of $15 for setup. And we also see the guts portion. What we see in each line here is the cost of the individual component. That's why we see this $15 setup fee not accounted for in the extended price and unit price of the upper portion. If you're wondering where the folding is, that's listed under its respective department, in this case finishing, and the price for this is pulled out too. And you'll notice that this is not the $15.15 extended price that it was inside of the calculator, but because of the markup, the unit price and the extended price have jumped up to account for that markup. If we need to get back in and make a change to something, we can click launch on any one of the line items that have the launch button listed. This will bring us into the main hub in which we can fill out and adjust information as necessary, such as adding a new portion or a type of part, changing our quantities, or adding additional services to the entirety of the job. You may find that you may need to, say, account for stitching above each of the individual components. For instance, folding may not be required for the guts portion or the cover portion, but it may be required for the entire project. In this case, I'm using stitching to stitch the cover and guts portion together. And upon clicking calculate, we'll see that we have under the part summary a list of the service costs, which is from here, with its own markup, which can be adjusted if needed. We have the cover and guts portions also broken out with their print costs, markup, and print totals. Everything when summed together gives us this grand total. And we can use this price matching field to overwrite what the system will calculate for us as a sale price, allowing you some freedom in terms of being able to quote whatever you'd like to quote to your customer for the entirety of the job itself. If you were to do each print component one piece at a time, for instance, one print item for cover and then another for guts, you wouldn't be able to see how much everything costs in tandem with each other. So using a multi-part form allows you to do that with a little bit more ease. In this case now, because we've created this multi-part job, if you look at one of our work orders, for instance, our work order print, we'll see that we have different information broken out. It starts by telling us information about the main job itself, such as what it is, how much there is for it, how many pages it's going to be, and what the individual parts will be as we proceed through the list here. Page 2 will include details on the cover portion, breaking out details on the text, stock, or the cover stock, the press, etc., listing the additional services that are used for this portion of labor, and also the inventory that's associated with this particular item. Our example also makes page 3 the guts portion, and again, it fills out the relevant information. Not showing services though, because we did not add any to the additional services tab within the guts portion. And finally, once all this is done, your scheduling board and dynamic job board will be updated to have one line item per print component or additional service that's set to appear via the admin menu, show on DJB commands. Now, we were able to add data in quickly by using a template. There are 2 different ways to add templates in Midnight. One can be from inside of the print calculator, and the other one can be done through the admin menu. In this example, if we bring up the print calculator for just a standard service, we can fill out our data in however much detail we need. I'll just do so by selecting the template here. We'll do postcards in this example. And if we need to create a new template within the calculator, we can select Add New Product under the template name, give it a name as needed, change up our information as necessary, and hit the Save button to commit that, thereby creating a new template. This can now be selected for future jobs, and it can be accessed in the admin to make any changes if necessary. And if we save and close out of here, we can actually take a look and see where everything is. Now we're spending our time in the print menu of our admin menu. The print product templates is where you'll find your templates listed for your small format jobs like offset and digital press type job. Our glow in the dark example here is now present, and we can see the information on not only the press but the colors of the paper, just as we would have entered in through the order screen. For instance, the $25 cost per pound that we overrode it with, and the white GID ink that's being used. We can also see other details like the press, the stock, and if there's any other details in position, additional services if they're included, etc. If you need to create a new template from scratch rather than viewing or editing one that already exists, you can do so within this screen by clicking under the quick link, Add Print Product Template. Alternatively, you could copy one that already exists, much like you just saw me do, and then make a small change to it. That way, if you're doing something simple like changing the color combination, changing the name that's used, changing one type of stock to another, or just maybe modifying one of your additional services to say add or remove a perforating service, you can just copy your templates and make subtle changes, save them right after each other, and have your templates ready to go. Additionally, within the template menu, you do have one option that you don't have within the admin screen itself. I'm sorry, within the order or estimate screen itself, and that is the minimum pricing. You can set minimum pricing up within the template, which does two things. One, it can be a minimum unit price that you force the job to have as far as the minimum goes, preventing your team from quoting a number too low. The other thing you can do is do a total with all services, where the unit price references only costs that are generated through the print calculator. The total with all services instead looks at everything, that being your cutters, your additional services from the additional services tab, folding, binding, etc., and then forces them to be included in the price calculation override or the minimum. After you fill out all of your information within the admin menu print template builder, you can, if you'd like, run a pricing preview by just punching in a quantity, selecting a customer to see if there's any customer-specific pricing discount or rates that need to be accommodated for, and click Calculate to get yourself an example. Assuming everything is filled out correctly, you'll have a price appear here. In my case, I don't even have a press selector, so I wouldn't expect to see anything appear. After you've taken care of building in your template, you can do sort of the same thing with wide format printing, and we'll get to that in a bit. In order to pull apart wide format calculator, you do need to make sure that you have a service or a group of services available. Have the instruction to launch your wide format or simple wide format calculators. I suggest using the WF or wide format, as it does have more information. In here, you can begin by filling out a name of your job, you fill out the size of what it is you're actually producing, pick if it's a single or double-sided object that you're printing, and select your wide format press, which carries in details like the minimum price, the cost per square footage, the method of quality, the coverage percentage, and just some other print estimate information. You can also enter your material sheet details tab to select the different types of materials that you're using, and if a lamination or mount are materials that you require for your job, you can select them as necessary as well, carrying in their pricing info and their dimensions to make sure you can actually print on them. Additional services is pretty much identical to what we saw a minute ago, only these are your wide format additional services, not your standard print additional services. So these may include fromading, hemming, trimming, and high-level hanging as other services that could be priced into the cost of the job. After you fill out your basics of your machine, count, and what material you're printing it on, once you hit calculate, you'll see that you have information on the far right that lets you know all the details on your job, such as how much material you're using, what the cost is for the press, the ink, and materials, if there's a cost per square footage versus just the cost for the job itself, what the markup would be, and what the grand total comes out to. In this case, the total price is simply the sum of pieces times the total each price, which is determined by taking the numbers from above here and multiplying them in down below. Hitting save and close in this case creates our print item, and then any subsidiary items that appear in their respective tabs, just like we saw for the folding service here earlier. The information from the wide format calculator either comes from the inventory module for your warehouse materials, or from the add menu press standard module for your press details, as well as the quality that you can utilize. The additional services also come from the admin standard services menu, although the control is a little bit different in there. We'll take a look at our admin menu here for this. To start, we'll jump into our standard services list. I'll pull up one of my raw services, and we'll see that there is the wide format additional service checkbox checked. This lets you know that this should be available within the additional services tab of the print calculator for a wide format job only. You set up a different method of pricing based on the material, based on time as quantity, of course, or based on area. You can set the price per unit that you're defining the price to be on. And of course, to bring up your print calculator with the wide format press calculator, you just need to make sure that the service action is set to wide format calculator. Simple enough. Do bear in mind that the press information doesn't account for any of this pricing. We also have our templates that we can build. They can utilize press information, inventory, and the quality setup. The qualities that we saw earlier determine how quickly your press will run based on the speed in which it's printing, and the quality in which it's printing, which would be assumed to be inverted from the speed. So the faster you go, the slower to work, of course. Or the higher the quality, the slower it should print. You can create new options in this bottom row. Fill out a dimension for resolution selection, just making things easier for your team. Fill out a square footage per hour, which is a print speed, and an ink cost per square foot. Should just be estimated. Once all that's set, you can go into your wide format product types menu. In here, you'll see the handful of templates I've already built. If you need to build a new one, select your quick links menu, add AWF printer. This uses our standard method of pricing. It assumes that you'll fill out your general information for your project name or template name and description, as well as the printer details of the size of the product that you're printing, if it's one or two sided, the press that you're actually running it on to pull in some information quickly, the minimum price of the press, the setup fee associated with the press, the cost per square foot per hour to actually run everything, the cost per square foot is an area relation of print charge. The hourly rate is the cost per run everything per hour, so as long as your press is operating. In this example, if it were operating for exactly 3 hours, it would be a 45-minute hourly rate job, plus the $10 that you have for setup, plus $2 per square foot that's printed. The other areas in here include the margin, which is simply just an absent space that cannot be printed on by your press. The quality, which again helps determine what the run speeds are and how much ink is consumed. And speaking of how much ink is consumed, a coverage percentage, so you know if your entire material is being covered by ink or just a portion. Your material sheet details Allows you to pick 3 different types of inventory. In this case, you have your standard printed material, along with a command to consume the entire sheet. If it is a sheet, what the dimensions of the stock are, so the system can tell you how much you can actually print per impression you're making, and an up count, so you know how many pieces you can get up. You also have a lamination and mount materials that you can select. These are a bit more diverse lists as they account for slightly different inventory types. These come with their own methods of pricing, such as the cost per square foot, of course, but also the roll width per lamination material dimension, and the sheet size for your mount dimension, as well as the up count. Finally, the additional services tab shows exactly what you expect to see, like the grommeting service we had a few minutes ago. Now, the final area to look at in here comes from the volume pricing tab. We did look at this in our basic print estimating training. The behavior in the print estimating training there is pretty similar to what we have here. The discount percentage or the rate can be applied, but not both. And these would be applied to the quantity. So that way, if you have, say, a quantity of 1,000 listed with an 8% discount, the quantity of 1,000 is the breaking point in which 8% is applied. If your customer orders 999 pieces instead, then they do not get the discount. Alternatively, you can utilize the rate. You can only have either a rate or a discount. The rate would just say that at 1,000 pieces, start charging this per piece, regardless of what the cost is. Once you're familiar with that, you can hit save to push it in. And finally, you have your markup percentage on the template level and your waste percentage to help determine how much material is being utilized. And once your template's built, you can fill it out on the job as quickly as you need. Now, the way materials work is handled a little differently for your wide format material and your print material. Where you normally in your admin menu have your item types within your warehouse set up to mention that your inventory is associated with a print type, if it's envelope or just a general paper. You have 3 different types of inventory that you can also classify for wide format focus only. That being your WF type or wide format type, mainly meant for the material, the laminate type, and also the mount type. In our case here, we can see that we have these 3 all listed on their wide format. That's why we saw the inventory that we saw within a couple of drop-down menus in the calculator. If we look up item types of WF, we'll see our materials that we were able to select a few moments ago. And finally, if you jump into your your paper details tab within the paper record itself, you can fill out dimensions as, say, the dimensions of the stock, the caliper or thickness of the material for cutting, for pricing information, the cost per square foot, and any other information you feel necessary. So going back into our system job that we just set up, we do want to take a little bit of analysis as far as the cost goes. In the main hub of our multi-part job, we do have a little bit of additional pricing to consider. This that's related to the additional services that are added on top of the main job. In this case, everything we see is listed at cost. So the unit price of 1.805 cents does come from the service's cost. We also assume that the print cost is made up of the different elements of the print calculator, such as the press cost, material cost, and of course the ink cost, as well as any other additional services that may have costing tied to them. For the presses themselves, they will all have an hourly rate. This is assumed to be the cost per hour to run your machine and is typically considered to be the primary factor in determining the press cost. In this example, we have a $280 hourly rate. We don't have a press check fee, and therefore, if we take our $280 times the 0.41 hours the job is running, we come up with $114.80, which matches the press cost that you see here. Do note that if you're using a digital press, the press cost will still be calculated the same, only you won't have a press check fee to associate with. You'll have a setup fee that you'll associate with. The plate cost comes from ink under the color details tab. You have your different plates that you would utilize, and the system can calculate how many you actually need for your job. After filling this out, you can override it, or you can just let the system maintain its own numbers. And you'll see how frequently you have to cycle out plates by multiplying them by, or dividing them into the maximum amount of impressions the plate can print on, and how many impressions there actually are for the job. In this case, you're doing a small job, so you don't have too many to worry about. The plate cost is relatively easy. There's 8 plates at $15 each. At $120, that matches our plate cost here. The ink cost is a bit more complicated to calculate. While under the color details tab, you have the coverage percentages, which impact how much of the per pound cost is utilized in determining the actual cost of ink on the order. You note though that in this case, as long as you have your percentages set, your numbers for the ink estimation will be fairly close to what they should be. You've got your paper cost, which comes from your paper details tab. If you're using roll-fed machinery, then you can have a variety of different ways to charge. However, if you're using sheet-fed machinery, everything's a little bit easier. You can just take the cost of 1,000 sheets and multiply it by the amount of used sheets to come up with the true cost. The paper cost itself can be a little complicated when considering wide format materials. But in general, as long as you got all of your different areas of pricing set up, such as cost per weight for your wide format stuff, or cost per 1,000 sheets for your sheet-fed, just general print task stuff, you should be okay. Do note that there is a paper markup which can be applied. This would take into effect before the job's global markup, so you could essentially double dip in terms of your markup application. So do just be careful when setting up a markup on your inventory. The services cost, as described earlier, comes from the services that do have the markup box checked, and therefore would be associated with the total cost that does have the markup applied. Last areas that we'll look at come in our global settings menu. Under our estimates and orders, we do have a few different options we can look at under our print and wide format calculators sublist. In particular, the Enable SWF roundoff and the Enable AWF old calculation checkbox are two different ways of condensing how numbers are calculated within the wide format calculator. I don't necessarily suggest that you use them. However, we do have some legacy users that rely on this as they've been using it for a number of years already. We also have the print estimate markup here, which is the global markup that's applied to any of your jobs or any of your templates that you're creating on the fly. Your templates themselves can have their own markup, and when those are added, then you don't need to worry about this one. You've also got an ink coverage default, which represents how much ink is going to be added per side. Your templates, of course, can override this, but if you don't, then either you change it on the job itself on the fly, or you just utilize what the template has to begin with. Most of the other information I do cover in our prior training sessions, so we don't need to cover all that too much here. That concludes today's Midnight 6.6 training on print estimating on an advanced level. If you have any questions for us, you can ask us anything you need at support@printreach.com. Alternatively, you can give us a call at area code 425-828-9495, extension 2. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We'll see you next time.